Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for another Journey on the Fly, the podcast. We're going to do a little technical talk. I'm pretty excited about this. I am joined tonight, another guest from the Somerset Conservation District, and we're going to be talking stream restoration and watershed restoration projects, and a very exciting topic, which is the Quemahoning tailwater fish habitat project. And this one's exciting to me, but in particular, we're going to be talking tonight about a project that has piqued my interest quite a bit in floodplain hydrology. My guest tonight is Greg Shustrick. And Greg, brother, I hope I didn't pronounce your name too incorrectly there. I do try, but I am an ignorant redneck. Nevertheless, remember, before we get into this, remember that you can find us where all podcasts can be found. And we want to thank our sponsors. Okay, now that we've done that, let's move on to the nitty-gritty. Give everybody a little bit of your background as far as college and things, and what drew you into being part of watershed programs and such.
Sure thing. So I grew up in Southwest PA. I always had an interest in the outdoors, particularly fishing. And this part of the state, there's a good pocket of it that's highly influenced by mine drainage. So, a lot of our better fishing was outside of the area. Spent a lot of time on the main stem of the Susquehanna fishing for smallmouth, but also hitting a lot of the local trout streams and mountain trout streams and other trout streams throughout the state. Growing up, I ended up going to college for wildlife and at Penn State, and then I ended up finishing up with an environmental degree. So currently working for the Somerset Conservation District as a watershed specialist, and to sum that up, what that means is the flowing waters of Somerset County are pretty much my office. And I do everything from ag improvements to culvert replacements to mine treatment systems and also fish habitat work. So a little bit of everything.
Very nice. And the interesting part about that little aspect of your life there is that you are what I would say, at least in your career to this point, you kind of epitomize what I've been trying to tell myself, and then obviously push on other people, which is if you're going to complain about something, do something about it. Not to say that you were complaining about things, but you saw a need, and it sounded like that intrigued you into that focus of school, and now here you are actually working on changing things that need to be changed. Not just from an angler's perspective, I would say, but probably environmental more so than the angler. And I think the angler always is, kind of benefits on the side of all this stuff, and we sometimes miss the point of stream reparations and watershed improvements altogether. Get a little selfish with it, I guess, sometimes, but so with that said, so you kind of got drawn in because you enjoyed the outdoors, because you enjoyed the world of fishing, and here you are doing work in Somerset Conservation, in the Somerset Conservation District. You have, and for everybody else, Greg and I met at the Cabin Fevers, a Trout Unlimited trade show here in Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania, and I was very much intrigued at another project that he's involved in that we can maybe touch on tonight, but don't have to. The Quemahoning, tailwater project that they've been working on for a while. And in the process of fishing through that, I don't know, sometime last year, I noticed that a lot of the diverters and things like that were all natural in the creek. There wasn't you couldn't tell a machine was in there. You couldn't tell men were in there working unless you looked really, really close. And that caught me caught my interest on top of the whole Watershed project itself, the whole tailwater project. So somebody introduced me to you there at the show, and we ended up exchanging information because you had now this what I want to call it here. Well, we use you guys' words. The large wood debris, the installation of large wood debris, the LWDs. Was this in particular kind of your brainstorm, like your little baby here?
To the site was
The site was okay.
Not the methods, not necessarily the practice, but no, just bringing that to this area, which it hasn't been done on that scale in this area before. That's that's what I did there.
Very cool. Well, break that down to us. What in the world's going on there? Why are there giant trees in my streams?
Okay, so kind of start from the beginning. This stuff has been practiced out west a good bit on salmon rivers for salmon runs, and installing giant log jams in bigger rivers out west. And that's been going on for decades. Here in the Northeast, and also upper Midwest, it's kind of, I think they've been doing it for a good bit in the upper Midwest and in parts of Michigan and Wisconsin, but the Northeast, with the current climate condition we're in, we're seeing a decline in brook trout primarily, and it's definitely climate related, but it is habitat related based on ages of the forest, and those trout kind of evolved with an old growth setting, which no longer really exists. We're in a second growth. There's large trees, and there are smaller pockets of old growth throughout the Northeast, but it's not a contiguous block that can provide enough dead and dying trees to continually fall into the stream to create the habitat that's needed for those systems. So what we did was kind of do that on a much smaller scale, kind of mimic what would happen through the succession of the forest. We did some tree felling over a mile of stream that is a wild trout stream that flows into the Queen Reservoir. It is a wild brown trout stream, and last year we did a fish survey there and noticed that the young of the year were not as abundant as they were in previous surveys. But the in-stream habitat has significantly changed in the past decade or more. Maybe some of it even wasn't there to the scale that it should be. So what the project was is to fell trees into the stream, interlocking the crowns of the stream or of the trees in the center or near shore. Each structure may be 5 to 7 trees, maybe 3 trees. It all depends on the size of the stream where we're working. This practice is not really something you can do everywhere. This happened to be on a water authority property. There's really no backyards or road crossings that are close to where we worked. So the whole idea behind the trees or installing large wood into the system is to mimic what nature would do naturally. But there's a whole host of benefits that come with just putting a tree in the stream. It does provide fish habitat for all age classes of fish. but it's also going to provide habitat for the macroinvertebrates and forage fish that live in that system. That will collect leaves and debris, but it will also push the high flows up onto the floodplain, backing water up, pushing it out onto the floodplain, distributing the energy across the floodplain, distributing nutrients across the floodplain, distributing sediment up onto the floodplain. And that's also beneficial to the plants and the trees, groundwater infiltration, the wetlands that are adjacent to the stream. So you get terrestrial benefits on top of your aquatic benefits as well. And just to sum it up a little bit, there's been other methods and ways to do fish habitat in streams. That's nothing new. That's been done, across the country, across the state, in many locations. But this practice, you kind of get more bang for your buck, and the dollar amount is relatively low when you compare the two.
Yeah, it seems this is probably more labor intensive than it actually is the need for materials, because your materials they're kind of there, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So we would go through, and it's not. There is a plan. We do have to get a permit from the state. We do have a plan that we submit, a design. We are strategically picking our locations where we want to do these practices. But yeah, the material cost is more of a donation from the landowner, and that's why we would do more on a public ground, or ground that's open to the public.
And say a word about something that, and I'm just going to be honest, because when I get a little bit of knowledge, it goes to my head sometimes. No pun intended. You had mentioned about how when these structures are put in, when these fallen trees are installed strategically and systematically, that when you get a flood, the water it hits against that. And I'm just trying to break this down for simple-minded people like me, and make sure I'm understanding it correctly, as you are my judge and jury on that. Where the very first thing that I'm seeing happen on a conservation side of it, not even thinking about the fish yet, is now instead of that water freely rushing down the stream, and sometimes taking the meandering out of a stream, this is going to back that water up and slow a flood down, slow the water down.
Yes, it'll protect downstream water, so all the water won't show up at the bottom of the hill at one time. So dispersing it across the floodplain, withholding some nutrients, withholding some leaves, and in doing, and fine twigs and leaves and branches, and that's the stuff that the macroinvertebrates need. That material to either build, if it's cased caddis, it needs that material to build its cases. They also eat it as well.
Yeah. So
it is food for smaller organisms that the fish do eat. So it's kind of completing that whole food chain thing. So why are the floodplains important, and why do we want that to happen? I mean, kind of encouraging flooding, and somebody might have a question that's not a good practice or not a good idea, or what are you thinking? A lot of our streams have been channelized, and in doing that, they kind of became a single thread channel. And the way that nature intended these streams to operate and function, they were braided channels. There were dry channels that are on the floodplain that could manage higher flows. And if you look at our road networks and culverts and bridges and the way that we've channelized streams and brought them all together, kind of turned it into more of a drainage system than a natural stream setting. So in doing that, we are seeing more flood events, but we're also seeing more precipitation in a form of rain having milder winters, so we are seeing a lot more flooding now than maybe we did 30 or 40 years ago. Now, this isn't something that we would do, low in the Allegheny, main stem of the Allegheny or something like that. We're talking headwater settings, small streams, maybe 30 feet max in width, but usually smaller than that, maybe 15 feet.
Okay.
Is kind of what we're targeting. If we withhold, some of those floodwaters higher in the watershed, benefits of downstream flooding are going to be there.
And this is such a, and I'm not saying this to in a pejorative manner. I mean it because it seems like it is. It's a very simple solution with incredible amounts of benefits, is what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing.
Yes. So, it's mainly it is a small crew of chainsaws and winches. We aren't bringing in traditional fish habitat projects. We would be sourcing rock, logs, creating an access road, having disturbance, cutting trees down on our way in, staging that equipment. In your footprint and your impact are greater, but you are making something that's more of like a permanent structure in doing that, or a permanent fishing hole, so to speak. Whereas this, we're kind of bobbing and weaving throughout the forest, selecting specific trees in specific locations, and only taking what we need. Really, the only thing that anybody's going to notice after the fact is the saw cut end of the log. As they season, they'll become buried in sediment. They'll settle into the stream. They'll get covered with other debris that's coming down the stream. And for listeners, this isn't really like a beaver dam. It's not going to look like a beaver dam in 2 or 3 years. It's more of a flow through type structure. It's not. We're not damming water. We're bracking water up, but we're not damming water up. And we might only back it up, 6 to 8 inches, but that might create might take a 2.5 foot pool to 3.5 feet or something like that in higher flows. Well, go ahead.
Here's a question I have for you, because you mentioned beaver dams, and actually there's an article that I'll share on here that you sent me. I'll make sure I link to it. It's from the Tribune Democrat, and you mentioned in there, I think, about beaver dams as well, or maybe it was in conversation. Will these structures, because you are adding, when the water hits it, it's gonna in a sense bounce back. You'll have eddies and things. You're actually creating structures, if you were putting a boulder almost in one respect in the stream. Will that actually over time help with things like oxygen depletion and things like that downstream, because you're actually producing something that's, and this is a world where I can kind of visualize it but not articulate it, where oxygen's brought into the water through things like this. Is that a benefit at all?
Yeah. That's one of them. So it will increase dissolved oxygen. I mean, you're going to get recirculation as the water flows over the log. And in most of these settings, I mean, we're going to be doing them probably in a trout stream that probably doesn't have that. That probably isn't an issue in most, if it's, if the stream supports wild reproducing trout, it probably doesn't have an oxygen situation or issue, but that's definitely something that, in lower flows or warmer temperatures, it could help in thermal refuge by scouring a pool below the structure, making the water deeper so the trout can find thermal refuge closer to the stream bottom, and have some overhead cover to protect them. So that's probably one of the greater benefits, is just that they can get in it. They can eat when they're in there. They can eat beside it, below it. around it. It's just a good thing for trout.
Which everybody listening is most likely, probably anyways, a trout fisherman at some level. And I keep thinking to myself that somewhere behind the scenes you have a side gig that you're selling flies because you know that people are going to lose a ton more, but
Right. Yes.
there are ways around that, and in my opinion, these are places where now we're just going to have to when we start to see these things show up more, and I hope that's what happens over time. This catches on even more in Pennsylvania and some other places, um, in particular, of course, but where you just have to hone your technique, right? You have to figure out a
Yeah.
way to
Yeah. I
toss.
mean, it's definitely. You could look at it two ways. You can walk around it if you want to. We're not doing it for hundreds of yards, continuously. So
Yeah.
we'll pick those strategic locations to say that this looks like a good spot for XYZ reasons. And then if there is a nice pool or a nice run or something that is good as it sets, we're probably not going to bury that in wood. We're gonna leave, at least in my approach, that we're on a smaller stream that might not have that many places like that. If there's something good, we're going to leave it alone. But yeah, as far as fishing goes, if you're going to fly fish it, you're going to lose some flies. So simple patterns. But you probably want to fish just above or just below it, around it. And the main purpose is kind of, it's more of a hotel with a lot of vacancy. And once it's full, those fish have to move out of there. It can only support so many fish. So you might find on a certain day, a certain percentage of the fish that live there are going to be in the wood, and a certain percentage of them are going to be out feeding. So if we create a high enough or abundance of trout that they'll be in both places at the same time. So we really want to take our, in this particular project that we had done, we want to get our 2 to 6 inchers to 8 to 13, more catchable size, but also a very robust population of small fish.
Yeah. And you said that in the beginning of this project on this one particular stream that you didn't see a large amount of small
Yeah,
fish.
there was more adult fish because they could outcompete the small fish, or they were eating the small fish. So it is refuge for young of the year. It is to bring in that next age class. They need to hide from bigger fish, even if they are also trout. I mean, so in that case, we got a lot more adult fish. They were nice fish. We got a handful of fish though that also had a lot of scars from great blue herons on their back, which shows they are they're exposed a lot more than they should be. Herons are supposed to eat trout, but it seems as though in this particular stream it's had more of an effect on them because there just wasn't enough undercuts and enough big chunks of wood or depth of water to kind of get away from that.
Yeah, I think there's two fishermen. There's two views of these things. You had kind of alluded to it a little bit. You can either walk around it or you can figure out how to fish it. And I think there's some people that see it like as, oh man, this is where my waders are going to get ripped or I'll break a leg. But there's some of us that look at it and say that there's a big fish in there or there's fish in there because it just seems like it's a fishy place for them to be. And there's a stream that that's north of me that has this right in the one right where there's a couple sharp S bends, and right at the outflow of the last one downstream before there's a long stretch of nothing really, there's this huge, just complex log jam, and I don't think it was installed. I think not by man anyways. And it's interesting because I know people that have caught the same rainbow out of the exact same location for like 3 or 4 years in a row, and it's been in there so long it looks like it's wild. It just has that coloration and stuff to it. And you'd mentioned that in the article that that in the Tribune thing that this is even a good thing we're in stock waters that it'll cause a little bit of holdover protection.
Sure, absolutely.
Which to everybody that gets upset with price increases in license and things like that, this is one more small attribute to these types of uh, installations because it makes your money go a little bit further, right?
Yeah. Yep. Make your fish last longer.
Yeah.
Make your dollar go farther.
All right, I got one more question for you, and then you can kind of just wrap up if any kind of thoughts that you might have. Um, in the one um, booklet that you guys had handed me, and I was reading, because I'm interested in spawning fish and what that does energy budget wise and all that kind of things to trout. It mentions in here that one of the overall benefits and goals is spawning gravels. How do these installations, these projects, better spawning gravel?
Well, so a lot of our, I would think a lot of our quality gravel is buried in sediment. A lot of our streams have they're overwidened channels. We have a lot of overwidened channels that just aren't moving their substrate the way that they should be. And when you have a complex log jam, you get all kinds of multiple currents that are flowing through, flowing over, flowing under, and kind of sorting that bed load out, and depositing similar size material in places below the structure, and that's kind of what we're getting at there. That it would uncover and collect and sort of sort out the gravels that are moving through the whole system a little better, and keep them exposed with the flow of water.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that's also, I don't remember the book. It's literally within eyeshot of me, but I can't read it. Where there was a Project Water out west somewhere, and they were able to, and some of the tailwaters do this too, where they'll discharge at a certain amount, a really high level, for a really timed period, in particular to clear that substrate off, not just for spawning, but also for the invertebrates, because sometimes I know the burrowers and stuff can get through, but it makes it, if you have silt substrate, that makes it tough for a lot of different types of invertebrates to inhabit it. Am I correct there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it's adding, from an invertebrate standpoint, it is adding diversity. I kind of look at it as submerged surface area. So we're increasing the submerged surface area. So there's that many more places that, every species can pick their own little niche, their own little corner. If they like it 2 inches deep and it's, 3 feet from the shoreline, they can inhabit that. If it's a certain mayfly that really likes highly oxygenated water, it can be clinging on some logs that are against the bottom of the stream in the center of the structure where it's getting the most flow and most recirculation. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything us lay people out here can do, whether it's encouragement or whatever, to get involved in any of these types of things without obviously the liability of sending somebody out with a chainsaw? That's not what we're saying, by the way.
Yeah. The West, we have a partnership with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, and they have a large wood crew that has done a lot of work in the Allegheny National Forest primarily. They're doing some other work, and it's mainly the northwest corner of the state. But we partnered with them to mainly do the saw work. I have some equipment that I own through the district, the winches and cables and things like that. But we are also partnering with our local Trout Unlimited chapter, and we outside of saw work, we welcome volunteers to help if they can make it and come. And I know that the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy has done the same thing. So between either one of those avenues, the public can get involved if they reach out. Um, so there's that side of it, but one thing between the article and this podcast that I wanted to get out was more so that if you see that log jam, that it's not something bad, and I referenced in the article that we kind of refer to it as a beautiful mess. I mean, it's supposed to look that way. It should be that way. And I get it if it's at a bridge and you live upstream or downstream of that bridge and it's backing water up, then that particular log jam might not be needed, and for the safety of the people on the road and everything else, could be removed. But I feel like just through my line of work and talking to the public and people, there is this mentality that anything clogging the channel, anything that goes across the channel is really bad. It's a really bad thing. It needs to be dredged. It needs to be removed. It needs to be dug out. And the message I want to send is, that's not always the case. It might be if you're in a more urban setting where it will definitely cause an issue, but when you're in these wilder settings, it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think you've communicated that 100%. Like, just from me sitting here listening, there's no doubt that I was, and I'll just say this because I know a buddy of mine that's going to listen to this is going to get on me when he hears it. So there's a particular stream 5 minutes from my house that is a Class A brown stream, and there's this massive log jam, and it actually is some of the best holding water in the whole stretch of the stream. But there's this one log that sticks directly out about 6 feet above the stream that makes it nearly impossible to cast anything into it. And I'm like, I just want to cut that one little piece of wood out of there.
Yeah.
And he's like, there you go, destroying our streams. But that's the good stuff in there. I mean, not everything should look like, and no offense to any of the Trout Unlimited projects, not everything should look like it came out of a box and into the stream as a Trout Unlimited project. I mean, this is the beauty, I think, of what you're saying. This is what nature intended, and that's where those fish flourish the most.
Yes, I agree. And not that those there's a lot of those types of projects out there. I've installed several myself. And if you're in a setting where it is in the backyard and you don't want it to move, I mean, this one thing I didn't mention was that these logs are over. They're trees. They're not just logs. They're trees. So, and for the most part, a lot of them are more than 2.5 times the width of the flood channel, the high water mark. So in high water, they aren't going to dislodge. They aren't going to. They would have to float and spin around, and they're wider than the channel, so you physically can't do that. Although the leaves and debris and any of the anything that might fall in naturally that would be coming down the stream. So we kind of want that stuff to be mobile and move from structure to structure. Okay. But back to those more permanent type, logs, rebar, rock structures, those are more of a Band-Aid structure. Maybe you do have heavy erosion near a bridge or in a backyard or, beside a playground or something. And you want to shore it up. You don't want to do it with riprap or concrete. It is a more natural approach to doing that. There's a place for those too. So, but yes.
All right, man. Well, I would love to continue discussing things with you because I enjoy your knowledge, because I think the more we are educated as anglers, and as hopefully what you'd consider yourselves, any listeners out there, conservationists as well as an angler, I think there's a symbiotic relationship. You can't have one without the other, in my opinion. But the more knowledge we have of things, the more we appreciate them. There's so much to what creates a great trout stream, and so many times we overlook it because we didn't have a successful day or whatever the case may be. And not only was bringing you on here, Greg, and discussing this, wanting to highlight this particular project and this methodology that you're using to restore these streams and so forth, important on a knowledge level. But I also wanted people to realize that this is bigger, this is deeper, this is more sophisticated in many respects than what we realize, from a 30,000-foot view, and to appreciate it more when we see it, when we experience it, when we catch a fish, when we come back to a water that, like you said, that there's a decrease. We're seeing a decrease in brook trout, because of water quality and other issues, and when projects are put in and we experience a fish in those creeks now or eventually, to appreciate all the labor, both mentally and physically, that went into making that better. So I'm going to say thank you for you and everybody that's helped you and volunteer, and anybody that hears this that's done any of that kind of work. And with that said, all right, well, we talked all the technical stuff there, which was really super important and will always be. Give us a little bit of insight into your fly fishing world. Like, what moved you to fly fishing? Was this something you picked up, when you were 2 years old and whatever? Or how did that happen?
So my dad and grandpa did a little bit of fly fishing. They had fly rods. They probably fished more bait on them than they did flies, but they fished Spring Creek back in the early Fisherman's Paradise days. So I was always aware of it. Didn't know a whole lot about it. They weren't diehard fly guys, but they did fish trout a lot. So sort of started with that idea. I just kind of wanted a fly rod, and I ended up before I got one. I think I was 14, and I took a fly tying course through Trout Unlimited, and it just kind of went from there. And it's almost 30 years now, and got my first fly rod, fished some rookie streams, and took it everywhere I went. Trout water primarily. I did some smallmouth stuff early on, but really transitioned into nothing, trout and salmon both. So I have a 6-year-old, and I got him his first fly rod, a little Eagle Claw fiberglass rod that I felt like he couldn't break, and a little Martin reel, and he's had it for 3 years now, and he's caught quite a few fish on it. I got him to the bench. He's tied, some basic nymphs and some salmons and stuff like that. But I also give him he does enjoy taking a pile of material and just kind of freestyling and doing his own thing. And actually, he's come up with some creative stuff that he's caught some panfish and stuff on it. It's just definitely something that's I'm proud of him, kind of following his dad.
Absolutely, that's awesome. That's when was it? September of last year. My son's a little bit older, and he comes up to me. He goes, "Dad," when does trout season open? And I just looked at him and I put my head down and I said, "I have failed you. Trout season never closes in this household."
Yeah, same thing here. It's the lifestyle.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's. I would imagine, because I've heard it said before, from even the trout bitten guys like Dominant Sumtoski, that there's something about tying that seems to make you more of a complete angler. Well, you've taken it, in my opinion, from where I sit, you've taken that to the extreme where not only are you fishing and tying, but now your world is so much about water and restoration. So, was your passion for fly fishing a bit of a driving force to do what you're doing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's definitely
Okay.
connected. It just, like I said, I always had an interest in the outdoors, but kind of growing up where I did, I was always aware that there was, a lack of fish in some watersheds, mainly due to mining, but habitat can pretty much not have enough, never have enough habitat.
So, of all your years fly fishing, do you have
Hmm.
that one story that seems to stick out in your head that you go back to every time when you're, whether you had a bad day or it's one of those campfire stories that has to come out occasionally that just thrills you, or maybe it's funny. Who knows?
I don't. I have a lot of good memories. Honestly, like most recently though, it's more. What I did was, I made sure we had some family members that have ponds. They're allowed to fish and catch bluegills, and everyone wanted to, want to take, the kid over and catch his first fish, and I was hell bent on his first fish being a wild brook trout. And I was, he spent a couple weekends with his grandparents, and the pond is close by, and I was always afraid they were going to take him down there and catch a fish, and I wouldn't have been there, and it would have been a bluegill or something. And there's nothing wrong with that. It was just one of those things that I just wanted to do. So, that didn't happen. So he was like 2.5, and he didn't really catch the fish, probably like most kids. But we did pick a day to go to the stream that I grew up fishing, some wild brook trout on, and what I did was I got like an acrylic, a bigger, like 8x10 acrylic Tupperware that was waterproof and watertight, and got to a little pool, and just a couple casts he caught, hooked up with a like 8-inch brook trout, and he I handed the rod over to him. He reeled it in. I didn't want him to squeeze it or mishandle it or anything. So what we had done was we filled that acrylic Tupperware up, put the fish in there, closed it, and had a couple pictures of that. And it was a good way that he could hold it up, take a look at it, and turn it in different directions. And but yeah, that's right now that's my favorite one.
I could understand why. That's pretty awesome, and good for you for putting that rod in his hand and getting him out there with you, because that is, I can tell you, my son turns 15 here soon, and we have a pretty darn solid relationship, which I know a lot of people can't say that, and I would attribute a lot of that to our time in the wilderness with fishing rods and just not catching stuff and catching things and catching
Mm-hmm.
each other.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I haven't caught him yet, but he's hooked me in the mouth with a. At least it was a barbless hook, but nevertheless, that's awesome. Do you got a? I know this is kind of a generic question, but I'm always interested in it. Do you have a favorite fly?
Mm, I know it's. I know I should. I know I should. I fish a lot of nymphs, and I like bug. I mean, I really like buggers. I know people or variations of buggers. I mean, that's just something I'm gonna not be. I'm not gonna be caught on a string without some form of bugger, whether big, small, any different variation of a bugger.
Well, I have a confession to make about buggers. So I've been fishing for a little while
Mm-hmm.
and tying for probably not as long as you've been tying for sure, but I just actually tied my first woolly
So, yeah.
bugger. I don't know why. Well, I do know why I tied it, because I had a guy ask me if I would make him some, and I'm like, sure. And that's what drove me to do it. I mean, I have them. I have other streamers and things like that, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. I guess because they have been a staple and they're typical, and I'm one of those rebellious idiots that doesn't want the typical in my box, but realizes
Right.
that
Yeah.
that's a good
I
bug.
wouldn't say my box is very typical. It's just I have certain flags for certain situations, but I probably wouldn't be caught dead anywhere. I mean, buggers just catch fish. That's
Yeah.
what it comes down to. Yeah.
So are you taking them out for Youth Day? Do you do any tradition
Yes.
like that? Cool.
Yeah. We usually, yes, we do. We do that. Let him have his day, and we just kind of take pictures and laugh.
With that said, if any of us wanted to get involved, how would we find out where and when projects were happening? How do we, all that nitty gritty, connecting with you and the conservation district and all that stuff?
Yeah, if somebody has questions, they can reach out. They can email me directly at my work email, which is, I'll just spell it out. It is GREG hyphen SCD at WPIA.net.
All right. Awesome, man. Well, I thank you for your time. Are you,
Absolutely.
ladies and gentlemen, that was Greg Shustrick. Greg, I know this sounds redundant, but I appreciate your time. I really do. I appreciate your knowledge and your hard work repairing our streams and all the men and women like yourselves that have taken a passion and have driven it into a vocation that makes a difference. We should not take these things for granted, ladies and gentlemen. And every time you come across a log jam and you wish you didn't have to walk over it, well, remember Greg's words. You can walk around it if you want, but remember my words that there's a fish in there, right? Remember to not take these things for granted, from the installation work that's done by man to the way in which nature has adapted to create this habitat for these beautiful fish in these beautiful places. And when you see them, don't complain anymore. Don't take them for granted. You know, part of this show is me trying to reinforce that, to be grateful and to be thankful. Now, I'm going to tell you that thankfulness and gratefulness is only something expressed to persons, from persons. It makes no sense to be grateful to a log jam, but you can be grateful for those log jams and for people like Greg who have put in the intellectual and the physical labor to make those types of things happen. So don't take them for granted. Don't take your watershed district for granted and your conservation districts. Find ways to get involved. Find ways that you can help, that you can change these things, because man, it ain't gonna happen any other way. It just isn't. So listen, when you come across the log jam next time, I want you to think to yourself and hear Greg's words in your mind. That is a beautiful mess. And enjoy it. And until the next time, remember, keep your lines wet and your flies in the fish's mouth. God bless.